Hey everyone, welcome back to Bible study. We're starting the Gospel of John. Yeah, this is a huge book, and my prayer it's a tough one to preach and teach. There are two types that I find really difficult to preach and teach. There's one type of book that is like Revelation, where people just don't know the genre, they don't know the imagery, and you have to teach them all of that. The second tough one is a book like John, a Gospel of John, that people have heard so much and they think they already know it. Unfortunately, it's one of those ones that is much deeper than most people think. And when you get into the depth of it, it just comes to life. It's a beautiful gospel. The the imagery, the way it comes across, the artistic nature of the writer, it's so inspired. By far one of the most enjoyable texts you're going to ever study. Now, the great thing about the Gospel of John, of course, is you can give it to a 10-year-old and they can read it and get something out of it. The Greek is actually not that complex. It's what they teach you when you first learn Greek. They get you to Gospel of John because it's repetitive. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. That kind of repetitive nature. But as you get into the details of the book, you realize it's as deep as any of the Gospels, any of the letters. And hopefully, by the time we're done, you guys are going to start to see some incredible imagery. And my prayer is that as you follow along, you start to look for certain things to help you to understand what John's doing. You're going to start seeing words like light and dark, life and death, these themes that come right out of the creation narrative, okay? So, but they have different meanings, and hopefully you'll be able to get a lot out of that. Now, the one nice thing about the Gospel of John, and you will notice that if you're paying attention, the Gospel of John is very different than Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are known as the synoptic Gospels. They are Gospels that are written more in a short historical framework. They're all dependent on each other. The Gospel of John is more artistically driven, but it doesn't make it less historical. And we must be aware that John is using the same genre as the Gospels, but he's more artistic in his development to say more about who God is. A difference between the synoptics and John is how much Jesus speaks. In the synoptics, he doesn't speak a whole ton, and when he does speak, he tells short sayings, short parables, or his longest is the Sermon on the Mount. Whereas in John's Gospel, he has whole diatribes. He will go on. You can go to chapter 17 to see just how much he will speak in John's Gospel. You will also notice that John's Gospel, unlike the synoptics, will put things in different places. For example, let's talk about the famous one is the cleansing of the temple. In John's Gospel, it happens at the beginning of Jesus' ministry. In the synoptic Gospels, the cleansing of the temple happens at the end. Now, some people have thus had to kind of create this idea that there were two cleansings. Highly unlikely. When you understand the genre, was not as worried about chronology as truth. Now, what that means is, for the people writing these Gospels, these biographies, these ancient biographies, it's what it is. It's a biography written in the ancient genres of Greek bios. They were not concerned about as much about chronology as they were about developing a story about God and the person of God. And that would be true if they were writing about the Caesar or anyone else in that genre is what I mean. So the Gospel of John is not concerned. So there's a reason, we'll talk about at the time, why he has the cleansing of the temple early on in his gospel and later on. The reason why they want to kill Jesus is different in the Gospel of John than the synoptics. The resurrection accounts are different, but they're all truth. And the reader, remind yourself that we should take it seriously, that we understand the rules of a gospel that the listener, the original listener, would have understood. This is not a modern biography, which we would be very concerned to make sure everything is chronologically correct, or that we have a great development of the childhood of a person. They didn't write like that, obviously, and they had different rules. So let's allow that to come through and not question it through our understanding of biography. So hopefully we'll be able to help you understand that. Now, the good thing about John's Gospel, which doesn't happen all the time, is he actually tells us the purpose of its writing. So this has to be the template of when we're listening to it. Now, I'd recommend if you have someone in your life to read it out loud to you because it was originally heard, listen to the beauty of the art. Or if not, just read it yourself or maybe get a download of the gospel. And I highly recommend you read it beforehand, before every sermon. It's really important, I think, to get the most out of it. So what is the purpose? Well, John's very clear. Now, Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written so that you may, y'all, by the way, this is in the plural, so this is for the church, that y'all may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. So the whole purpose of this is not just as an evangelical book to unbelievers. This is to the church so that we may believe in who Jesus really is, that he is the King, the Christ, the Son of God, that he is the very nature God, and that by believing it, we might have life. This word life is a fascinating one. We should get into that right away. Life is the word zoe, and zoe in Greek means abundant life, life with just vibrant life. The idea is that the life that he's speaking about here transcends just the breathing on somebody, the psyche, the life of it's the vibrant life. It's not just human life devoid of that. It's something that it's almost like a life that we were supposed to have in the creation narrative that gets sucked out of us by the time of chapter 3. This is the kind of life that God wants us to have, and ultimately it leads to eternal life. Now, I'm going to recommend a book to you too today, and it's called The Light Has Come. I recommended this to our Bible study, and this is an explanation of the fourth gospel. It's by Leslie Newbegin. This is a great commentary in the sense of it's talking about that exact thing, about getting the belief and how do you share this belief to the unbelieving world that John wants us as the church to first believe and then to go and share it out in the world. So now you will remember what I've said all the time is that John's gospel, all gospels and letters are, the beginning is the most important. It's it's to the map. It's the rules of how to read the map, as it were. It's telling you how to read this book. And so we must pay great attention. That's why I'm only going to do the first 5 verses. It's that important that we take our time so we understand how to read this book so that we might have belief and life. All right? So let's get into it. Well, in the beginning was the Word. Well, we know right away. What is the template for this? What is the rules to the map? The legend, as they call it. In the beginning, Genesis, right away. So something's going on here. The other Gospels, they don't start like this. They start with, Mark starts with the prophets. Matthew begins with Moses and Abraham. And you've got basically in Luke, you've got the Adam motif and the King David motif. So they're starting at an earlier time, and that's the framework of how you read their books. But John, he goes right to the beginning, and he wants to take us past all of that. This is a transcendent gospel then. It's not a gospel that is as concerned about historical events, though it's very historical. But it transcends it because God transcends history. God transcends the story of Moses. Again, he's going to go through the Jewish world. This is one of the most Jewish gospels of all of them. But he wants us to go back to the creation God. He wants us to go before the law and Moses and Abraham. He wants us to go back to the whole big story. I like to call John the big story. And in the beginning was the Word. Here we got this word language. Now, logos is the Greek here. And logos, a lot of people think, well, this must be a Greek gospel because logos was a very popular word in the Greek world. In the Greek world, they saw it as the origin, the creation, the logos, and these were the philosophers and Plato. They all had the logos as central to their understanding of how things came into order. The difference is they would have a very different view of God. God was not personal, God was not emotional, and the logos was almost like a power that made this come into being. Now, the problem with that is, of course, in that this is a Jew that's translating into Greek. So we need to go back to the Jewish word for the word, And the word there is debar. Debar, and I don't know Hebrew, but I've got to trust the commentators here, that this word was actually the living personification of the immanent nature of God. This word had to do with the declaration of creation. It had to do with reconciliation or redemption, and so forth. These were words about God's imminent work in the world. So what he's saying is, in the beginning was the Word. He's saying in the beginning was the creation, origin, the manifestation of God in the world. That's how they would have seen that as Jews. It wasn't an impersonal power as the Greeks did. It was a personal action of God in the immanent created order. So in the beginning, all the Jews would say, yeah, of course, this kind of word was in the beginning, and it was God's action in the immanent world, this transcendent God. That's how they understood it. And the Word was with God. Now, that language, maybe a Jew would say, okay, I'm with you so far. But what's happened immediately is, rather than the type of monotheism that they understood in first century Second Temple Israel, he immediately has a monotheism with persons. The Word now has its own person, and because it says was with God, there's something different about this word than is directly with Yahweh, yet he's exactly the same. So what is this word? Well, the Word was with God. This verb "with" is an interesting verb. It's an intimate with. Now, not a eros. It's not that kind of intimacy, but it's a tight-knitness. So it'd be like I was with my wife watching a movie. There's an intimacy there. Unlike the other verb for "with," which would be like I was with a guy at the bus stop. So this word right away begins to show us that there's a relationality here between the Word and God that is far transcends just a power that's non-connected, impersonal God like the Logos in the Greek thinking. This was a very personal word that was with God, that had strong intimacy with God. And then he says, and the Word was God. Now here, this little section here gets a lot of people, has traditionally got some people misunderstanding. It says, and the Word was God. There is no article before God. So it doesn't say, and the Word was the God, or the Word was a God. It just says, and the Word was God. That has led some, like the Jehovah's Witnesses, and before them the Russellites, and before them the Arians, to all believe that Jesus was somehow separate from God, and the Word, he didn't say he was the God. And so they'll say, and the Word was divine. It can't be divine because there's a different word for divine. Now, remind yourself that Jehovah's Witnesses aren't scholars. But why would he leave the article out of there? Why would he not say, and the Word was the God? Or he could have said, and the Word was a God, if he was trying to reach out to the pagans, because they had multiplicity of gods. But he doesn't say that. He says, and the Word was God. So what's he doing there? Well, if he said, and the Word was the God, he's in trouble, because he is going to differentiate between God in the flesh, Jesus Christ, and God the Father, and ultimately God the Holy Spirit. If he put the God, then he cannot have a more than one person in God, because it's the. And it can't be a God, because obviously that would lead into some sort of a paganism, a hierarchy of gods. Why does he put this without the article? Because in the Greek, and this is the power of this, and the Word was God, when you don't put the article, it's like putting an exclamation at the end of the sentence. So it would be like this: in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and then the end is the exclamation, and the Word was God. Like, can you believe it? That's why he leaves the article out there. It's the emphasis. It's the exact opposite of the Jehovah's Witnesses, that John's going unbelievably, especially for those first century Jews, that they couldn't believe that this word, that this, who we are, of course, are going to find out is Jesus Christ, was God in the flesh. No one expected that. And that is the power of John's gospel. He's starting right at the beginning, and he's placing Jesus as the incarnate God. He was in the beginning with God. We got that language of with again, double time, 2 times he says it. That's the emphasis. So he was in the beginning with God. So in the beginning, he's going back to the creation story. predating the creation of all things. He's already there. Now, notice also that in the beginning, God created. It's an action in the Genesis account. You'll notice in John, it's a declaration. So John's different than the action of the creation narrative. He's doing this, and what we're going to find out throughout John is he's more concerned not with so much with the action of the Creator God, but who the Creator God is, and thus how we can see ourselves in relationship with God. All right, he was in the beginning with God. And then he goes into this thing, which is definitely juxtaposition towards the creation narratives around him, who said certain gods created the earth, certain gods made the heavens, certain gods were the sun, all of that. Notice what he does here, and he double states it to make his point. And that's, again, the Jewish way of emphasizing things, is to say things twice. They did not have exclamation marks and the like punctuation in their language, so they used other tools to emphasize things. And he says, all things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. It sounds like a weird sentence unless you understand that he's trying to make his point. He's trying to drive this home, that this is the creation God. He predates the creation narrative. He is God, and everything comes through him. So the foundational section of our text here today that he wants us to understand so that we may believe in who Jesus really is and really have life through him is that there is this reality that everything around us, both in heaven, both seen and unseen, spiritual and physical, everything was made through him. He's the ultimate power in the universe. That's going to be very important because you're going to see a very human Jesus. Thank God he was fully human because he could save us. That is going to suffer. And you can imagine that a lot of people would have trouble with that because a lot of them had very odd views of God, just like we do today. But this is a very personal God. But do not misunderstand, John wants to say to us, this is the creator God of all of the universe that is encompassed into this person. And we will never have a true relationship with Jesus until we come to terms with that. All right. In him was life. There's this word Zoe. Out of him comes more than just natural life, but abundant life that transcends this, our psyche, our natural life. Okay, psyche was the word for just a human being that, like, God breathes on them and he can now breathe and have a limited life. That's a psyche. That's a human life. This abundant life transcends that. It's going to end up being he's going to correlate it with the resurrection life. And the life was the light of men. Now, right away, what do we find in the creation story? It's about darkness and light. He's going to transcend that. He's going to make it different. Darkness is not particularly evil or good. It's chaotic in the creation narrative. And there was darkness that hovers over the great deep, and then God comes in and he brings order and he brings light, and then he separates the light from the darkness and calls it good. Light, in this case, he's transforming into what it really becomes very quickly post the creation narrative, especially after chapter 3, as the goodness of God, the spiritual truth of God, the revelation of God, the beauty of God, the morality of God. The light is going to be all of those things. And it shines in the darkness, and darkness is surely chaos, but it's more than that. It's a malevolent entity by this time. Darkness is that force which destroys, that we let into our lives in chapter 3 when we tried to be like God. So the light shines in the darkness. Now, of course, this is his gospel. Jesus Christ, the light and life of the world, is going to come into a world that is dark. And why that's important for Paul is he's foundationally saying the world is dark. And God had to come in to bring the light. The world is not good. The world by its nature is dark, full of idolatry and the light, but the light comes in and shines in the darkness. So the worldview of Paul is the same worldview Christians should have, is that there is a darkness and it is there, but the light comes into the world and the darkness has not overcome it. In other words, the darkness cannot stop the light. And that's the good news. It does, and especially for that early church who's certainly going to suffer for their new faith, is that this light is not going to be overcome by the darkness of the world around them. And that's what John's going to start with. Those are his first 5 verses. And what he's saying is we got to know who God is, and we got to know the situation, and what the good news is, that this God is the Word. He's the creator God. He's Jesus Christ. We're going to find that out. And that this dark world we live in, the light wins out. So that's what he wants us to start with. So this creator God has come, and by the end of John's gospel, he's going to be the new creation, and he is intimate with God, and the darkness will not overcome it. And that's what he wants us to believe in, so we have life, because the world's going to be dark and we're going to live in it. But the good news is, even the darkness in our side ourselves that fights with us, it will not overcome the light of Jesus Christ in us. So that's the good news. So let's get into the questions. All right. Why is it important that John starts in the beginning, or origin? Why is this important for us to understand if we are to proclaim the gospel? Okay. John says that in Jesus was Zoe, abundant life. While referring to life given as creator, he's also referring to a different sort of life possible for a human being. How might you describe abundant life for the Christian to a person who does not yet believe? All right. And finally, John says in Jesus is the light of men, and the darkness does not overcome the light. What might he mean? How might this be good news for those searching for the living God? All right. I look forward to journeying with you guys through John. Just a big plug here. I'm telling you, Mr. Goheen is coming, Dr. Goheen. He is doing that conference. I highly recommend this, guys. It's going to be, I think it's going to be a wonderful understanding of what we're doing here at Mountain View. I think his view of mission is very much what we are. He's very accessible, and I really hope you take the opportunity. It's $50. It's nothing really in the drop of it, and you'll even get a free meal out of it from the wonderful Dutch ladies next door. So I highly recommend it. Please look online to sign up. Or if you don't have the means, or you know somebody who doesn't have the means, we will happily cover them so that they can have this teaching as a church. All right, thanks.